The reason my program is so different is because I target insulin. Most people today are overproducing insulin. They're eating foods that are triggering a high insulin response, and they're loaded with insulin. Insulin is the master fat storing hormone. It is the only hormone that stores fat and makes fat. And when you target that and you eat accordingly and you live your life accordingly to insulin's rules, magic happens. You get into fat burning, you're sleeping through the night, your hormones come back online. Once you get insulin figured out, you get the keys to the fat burning kingdom. I learned all of this by studying my husband, Tom. Tom got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 15. So since 15 years old, he has been giving himself synthetic insulin. We've got to see firsthand what foods cause a blood sugar spike. Our bodies are designed to be fat adapted and to burn fat for fuel. Our ancestors always lived fat adapted, and that's our metabolic responsibility to do that. And we really need to do it not only for ourselves, but we need to teach our kids and grandkids how to do this. I know that it's all about here and now and being able to teach people how insulin works and what foods are spiking your insulin and what activities are spiking your insulin and what you can do about it.
For somebody tuning in right now, saying to themselves, I've tried all the diets before, this extra fat is just stuck with me. What about your protocol that you're using with all these thousands of women? What makes it different?
That's a great question. I love this question because I tried all the diets myself. I tried everything. I was vegan for 7 years. I did keto diet 6 or 7 times. I did the carnivore back when it was Atkins. Ate nothing but hamburger patties and eggs and pork rinds for 9 months. And nothing really changed much in my body through that whole process, except for when I was vegan. I destroyed my health when I was vegan. But other than that, I tried everything, Whole30. I always tried to eat pretty clean. In my adult life, when I was a teenager, I ate teenage foods. But as an adult, I tried to eat pretty clean. And then when I became a nutritionist, I just kind of stuck to the paleo diet. And I thought it was the easiest thing for everybody to do. Like I said, I had tried keto 6 or 7 times and didn't get really any results from it. And I had tried eating just meat and didn't really get any results from it. And so I just fell upon the paleo diet. I felt like it was the most simple. It was like easy to do. Everybody could eat meat and fruits and vegetables and, some nuts and move on. And so that's what I was doing. And I thought, that it was just like the most healthy diet ever. And I still felt like shit. I did not feel good. I had horrible periods. I had cystic acne. I was gaining weight every year. And I had tried all the workouts, all the different types of workouts, long distance running, HIIT classes, weightlifting, you name it. I did it, Peloton, P90X, and nothing ever seemed to help me get as fit as I thought I should be and as lean as I thought I should be for what I was doing. A lot of intermittent fasting and, restricting my calories, and it didn't work. None of it worked. So that's why I fell upon the paleo diet, and even the paleo diet didn't work for me. I felt terrible on the paleo diet. And so it really was the most serendipitous thing that ever happened to me, Jesse. I married a type 1 diabetic. And when I married Tom, my husband, I learned everything that I know today about insulin, and I can confidently say that I will go up against anyone on insulin. I don't think there's anyone that knows as much as I do about how insulin works, because I am married to a type 1 diabetic, other than Dr. Ben Bickman. He's really been the only one I've ever come in contact with that understands the way insulin works. So circling back, the reason my program is so different is because I target insulin. We help teach women about insulin and how insulin works, because insulin is the master fat storing hormone. It is the only hormone that stores fat and makes fat. And when you target that and you eat accordingly and you move accordingly and you live your life accordingly to insulin's rules, magic happens. You get into fat burning, you feel amazing, you're sleeping through the night, your periods normalize, your hormones come back online. All these wonderful things happen when you get insulin in what we call the Goldilocks phase. So that's basically where you're producing just the right amount of insulin. Most people today are overproducing insulin. They're eating foods that are triggering a high insulin response, and they're loaded with insulin. So this is where it comes, where you have fat people who are hypoglycemic. Well, if you understand what hypoglycemia is, it's when your blood sugar is low. And insulin is the hormone that drops the blood sugar down. So you can be two different forms of hypoglycemia. You can be the anorexic form of hypoglycemia, where you're starving yourself and your blood sugar is low from starvation. Or you can be the second type of hypoglycemia, where your insulin is high from over-consuming sugar and carbs, and you produce so much insulin that it drops your blood sugar regularly. And you overproduce insulin. That's hyperinsulinemia. And most people today on the planet are struggling with hypoglycemia because they're overproducing insulin. So once you get insulin figured out, you get the keys to the fat-burning kingdom. You understand how to run your fuel system and how to maintain that nice balanced insulin so that you're not slowing your metabolic rate down, but you're also living in fat burning.
Well, let's stick on insulin. I love this subject. And talk more about what's causing insulin to go astray. But before we get there, let's give a lay of the land, Insulin 101, when things are working properly, and then what triggers that change.
Yes. Okay. So when I learned all of this just by studying my husband, Tom. So Tom got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 15. So since 15 years old, he has been giving himself synthetic insulin. And because his pancreas stopped producing it when he was 15. And so we've got to see firsthand what foods actually cause a blood sugar spike. Because most people are walking around and they're eating, and maybe some of them are wearing continuous glucose monitors and they're testing their blood glucose and they're thinking, oh, I ate an apple or I ate some sourdough bread or avocado toast or whatever. And my blood sugar went up for a minute, but then it went back down. So I must not have any issues with my blood sugar or with insulin. And that couldn't be further from the truth. That's actually a very dangerous mindset to have, because in those people, their insulin is working. That's why they see the blood sugar go up for a minute and then it goes back down. At the moment it goes back down is when insulin has kicked on. It has entered the cell's receptor and it has transported the glucose across the cell membrane into the cell. And when you do that, it lowers the glucose in the blood. So the blood is the transport for all the glucose, and along with it comes insulin. And every time you have insulin near a cell, it will open up the cell and allow glucose to transport through, in turn taking that glucose out of the blood and registering it intracellularly. So a lot of people think they don't have a blood sugar issue. I was one of them. My fasting glucose every morning was 80. That's where the doctors want you to be. I thought it was perfect, but I was experiencing hypoglycemic moments all the time. Hangry, I'd get shaky, I'd feel like I was going to pass out, that low blood sugar feeling, super irritable and really hungry. And what I didn't realize was, my fasting blood glucose was 80 because my insulin and my cell receptors were still working. So I was producing a lot of insulin, it was dropping my blood sugar down, and everything was working fine. But what happens eventually over time is that system wears out. It's like a keyhole. If you imagine a door and you imagine the keyhole and the keyhole is locked, and the only way to go through the door is to unlock it. So imagine that insulin is the key. And every time it goes into the keyhole, it has to turn the keyhole so that you can go through the door and pretend you're glucose. That's how the system works. Insulin is the key. Glucose is what's supposed to be going through the door, and your cell wall, your cell membrane is the door. So insulin unlocks it through the receptor, and the receptor is the keyhole. If you have too much insulin hitting that receptor too frequently, then that receptor wears out. And that's called insulin resistance. Then your body becomes resistant to insulin and it doesn't hear the sound of insulin anymore. And that's where you develop type 2 diabetes later down the road. So what we did with our first, when Tom and I were first figuring all of this out, is we tracked his blood glucose and we watched those foods that made his blood glucose go really high. Now, he's had this since he was 15, so he already pretty much knew, but we really started narrowing in like basic foods. So for example, he would eat a ribeye steak, just a ribeye steak, and we'd sit and watch what his blood glucose did. And after, 3 or 4 hours, his blood glucose starts going up and up and up. And eventually it'd get up over 300 and it would just sit there for hours and hours, even until the next day. And so what was happening is he would have to give himself insulin, and he'd give himself insulin and it still wouldn't work. And then he'd give himself more insulin and it still wouldn't work. His blood sugar would stay high. And we're like, what in the world here? This is just meat, right? This isn't supposed to be making your blood sugar so high. It's just meat and fat. But that wasn't the case at all. It was making his blood sugar a disaster and it was locking it in. And he told me, he said, I have this problem when I eat really high fat, my blood sugar stays locked in and I can't get it to come down. So I have to give myself a shit ton of insulin to get it to come down. And that moment was like a light bulb moment for me. And I thought, this is why the keto diet didn't work for me. This is why the, eating just carnivore didn't work and doesn't work for so many people, because a lot of people don't understand. You're breaking protein down to glucose, and that glucose is turning into sugar. You're raising your blood sugar with the protein in the glucose slowly over time. This is why it'll stay locked in for hours. And then you have the fat behind it. Well, fat slows the absorption of insulin. And remember what I just taught you about, the insulin is the key to get into the receptor. Dietary fat, specifically saturated fat, in the bloodstream will cause a slow insulin absorption. Anytime you have a slower insulin transport or absorption into the cell, that insulin's not getting in there, what happens is your blood sugar stays high because insulin lowers the blood sugar. Your blood sugar stays high, so your brain says, oh shit, our blood sugar's high. We got to do something about that. Let's produce more insulin. And that's what we were seeing with Tom, is he was having to give himself so much insulin. And every time he gave himself insulin, I thought, well, that's what my body's doing, right? We eat the same exact foods, the same exact meal, the same amount of protein, the same amount of fat. If he had to give himself an enormous amount of insulin, I knew my body was producing an enormous amount of insulin, if not more. So I realized, okay, anything Tom does to have to overcorrect with insulin and give himself more insulin, that's the same effect in my body. And insulin's the master fat storing hormone. So anytime I'm producing way more insulin, I'm producing way more fat. So, and that's the simple, I know that sounds complex and like, it's kind of like drinking out of a fire hose, but this is specifically what we do in Primal Bod program, is we teach women how to understand this fuel system so that they know for the rest of their lives. Because in my opinion, we should have been taught this in health class in 8th grade, and we weren't. And it's very apparent when you look around and you see people walking the streets. They don't understand how insulin works either. So we have all these foods out there in the world that are incredibly toxic to us. And then we have these foods that society thinks are natural foods and that are actually foods that are healthy for you, like the fruits and vegetables, right? Those are all supposed to be healthy. And what I learned with Tom is that's not the case. So if I would make Tom a smoothie back in the day when we were paleo, and I would put, fruit, banana, maybe some almond butter and, just like Greek yogurt and some berries, and make him this smoothie. And I would give it to him to drink, and his blood sugar would go through the roof. The same as if he had a blizzard from Dairy Queen. And I was like, why doesn't anyone know about this? I can't be the first, but come to find out, I think I am. I think I'm the first to really sit people down. That's why I say it's the most serendipitous thing that ever happened. And I believe it's a gift from God that I got graced with this, like undying, love for nutrition and natural health paired with marrying a type 1 diabetic that I love, that's my soulmate. And that's how we were able to figure all of this out and, I spent hours researching all of this and trying to figure out, like, how does this work? How come no one knows about this? It was so frustrating. But now I've given up on that. I know that it's all about, here and now and being able to teach people how insulin works and what foods are spiking your insulin and what activities are spiking your insulin and what you can do about it.
All right, that's a great overview and a lot of areas I want to make sure we dive into. Starting with the biggest difference in the way you explain that versus a lot of other influencers, the fat piece, specifically saturated fat.
Mm-hmm.
This is often neglected, like I said, in our world where as long as the carbs are low, then in the carnivore or keto world, oftentimes that's given a pass. But what you're saying is we can't ignore the fat. We're not avoiding the fat, but we need to be mindful of it. Talk more about that piece and its impact on insulin.
So, I have watched this firsthand with my husband, with the ribeye effect. That's what we call it, the ribeye effect. But ultimately, you can just look it up on Google. Any anatomy physiology book will show you that fat slows the absorption of insulin. And any type 1 diabetic will tell you that, yes, anytime they eat a high fatty food paired with a form of glucose, then they get high blood sugar. So everybody understands why macaroni and cheese will make you fat. Right? It's a fat food. Everyone knows that. You eat more macaroni and cheese, you get fat. You produce a lot of insulin from macaroni and cheese. Ribeyes, for example, have the same effect. So they're really high in saturated fat or, any meat that's high in a lot of fat. So if meat breaks down to glucose, like we all know it does through gluconeogenesis, you're still getting glucose from that meat you eat. Not to mention, if your body starts eating all of this meat, you have your glycogen stores. So a lot of people don't consider this piece. And your glycogen stores have about 1,200 calories in glucose stored in your liver and muscles. That's where your glycogen stores are held. So meat breaks down really nice and slow over time. And the amino acids get turned into glucose. A lot of them do. 70% of the amino acids you eat get turned into glucose. And so you're turning that part into the glucose, and then you're eating all the fat that goes with it. Now, the other thing the keto and carnivore people miss is that fat also gets stored as fat. Fat that you eat will get stored as fat. And everyone wants to say, fat doesn't make you fat. It can. It can, but not as much as a higher fat food. And this is the part where everyone gets confused because they're like, well, why are the vegans so skinny? They eat so many carbs, right? So why are they so skinny if they eat so many carbs, but they produce a lot of insulin? They're missing the fat piece. This is the big thing. Most vegans don't eat saturated fat, for one thing. And they don't usually eat high fat because most vegan foods are lower in fat. So unless they're junk food vegans. But this is the piece where everybody gets confused at. And the fat is really critical. Now, we need fat. We need good, healthy amounts of fat in our body. We can't live without fat. It is necessary as much as protein is necessary. But if you stop and look at the wild and you look at wild animals, you will see that wild animals don't have a lot of fat on their body. And if we were eating meat for 140,000 years before we selectively bred plants, and we were eating just meat, and those animals didn't have the enormous amounts of fat on their body like pigs, cows, and chickens do, domesticated pigs, cows, and chickens, and we were eating wild game, hunting it, then we know that If that's the case, then that's probably what we thrived on, was those leaner animals. And yes, we did eat fat. We probably, broke open the bones and ate the bone marrow, and we did eat the organs, and we ate, pretty much the whole animal. But here's the deal. Anybody who's watching this will know, if you have hunted, if you are a hunter or you are a hunter's wife, you will know about the fat on wild animals. It does not taste good. Some of it is like shoe leather. You can't even eat it. It's so connected with the connective tissue on that animal. You literally cannot, it's like chewing on a bone. It's so dense in collagen and fibrous materials that you can't break it down, even with your teeth. So we would eat as much as we could, but the other part is it didn't taste that good. The fat on wild animals doesn't taste that good. Okay. And I've eaten a lot of wild game in my life. My dad is a hunting and fishing guide. I grew up on grass-fed beef. So we ate a leaner version of beef, and the fat on the grass-fed beef isn't like the fat that you get on regular beef. We ate elk, we ate deer, we ate, you name it, fish, all kinds of it. And guess what? We did not prize the fat on those animals because the fat doesn't taste that good, nor do they have a lot of it. So I look at that and I think this is why we get fat on fat. Nature didn't provide us with all that fat to eat. It just didn't. So we get fat on it. This is how the bears fatten up. They go eat the salmon. They literally pick all the fattiest pieces off the salmon to fatten themselves up. And they leave the fish meat part behind. So we are living in a domesticated world that now resembles a circus. That's what I call it. It's like a circus, and we have clown food. And the clown food is selectively bred plants that were not in the wild, that were made to grow huge amounts of sugar, and selectively bred animals, which I call Sesame Street animals, which are the cows, pigs, and chickens. And they're all producing huge amounts of fat on their body. And this fat is highly inflammatory. It's omega-6 fat. It's highly inflammatory. And we're storing it as fat. It's slowing the absorption of insulin down in our body when we eat it. So we're overproducing insulin. Anytime you overproduce insulin, you can't get into ketosis. Insulin is the gatekeeper for your fat cells. It sits on your fat cells. It will not allow you to burn your fat for fuel, which is how nature intended it to be. But if you have too much insulin, you're never getting into your fat cells. So it's one of those things that when you know, Jesse, when you know from a type 1 diabetic and you watch it happen repeatedly, you can repeatedly do it over and over and over again. Watch his blood sugar go up from a ribeye. You start really understanding how insulin works and how your blood sugar works. So the keto carnivore community, they think, oh, fat doesn't make you fat because it doesn't produce an insulin response, and insulin's the hormone that makes you fat. They're not wrong, but they don't understand those two factors, which is one, fat will make you fat. It will get stored on your body as fat. And two, the insulin effect of protein paired with fat. Protein paired with fat. It will cause an insulin spike. Now, am I saying don't eat fat and protein together? No, absolutely not. Eat it just like it came to you. But instead of just eating chicken thighs, eat the whole bird. Okay? Instead of just eating ribeyes, eat the tenderloin too. Eat the whole cow. Don't narrow yourself to ribeyes, bacon, and butter and expect to get super slim. Now, some people can, but the majority that I've seen cannot. And they come into my program and they're super upset because they did carnivore and, they didn't lose the weight like they expected. Or they did keto and they didn't lose the weight like they expected. And so they get in, and after, some of these girls have been doing carnivore for 2 years and they can't budge an inch. And they come in Primal Bod, they learn how insulin works, and literally in 3 months, they're down 25 pounds. They couldn't budge for 2 years eating nothing but meat. And these girls are strict. They don't fuck around. They're really serious about it. They're like, I'm doing just this. They're not cheating. So it's incredible to know that you have power over it, because a lot of people think that it's just their genes, it's their bad genes, or diabetes runs in their family. Well, shit. We all must be freaking cousins then, because diabetes is running in everybody's families. Cancer's running in everybody's families now. So we can't use that excuse anymore. We have to look at our diet.
Okay, I want to make sure I understand the physiology here. So there's the two different pillars when it comes to fat. The first one being saturated fat specifically, but too much fat in general, affects insulin. We produce too much of it. And you gave that example there of Tom, where his blood sugar stayed spiked off a ribeye for, was it almost a day?
Yeah, it was into the next day. We couldn't get it down overnight. Yeah, and we can repeat that. We've repeated it several times, and it'll stay locked in. It depends on how fatty the meat is. Like if he ate a whole ribeye with all the fat and a little pat of butter on top, yeah, he'd be destroyed until the next day. Like, for example, meat breaks down to sugar over time, slowly over time, and fat can stay in the bloodstream for a long time. That's why they tell you to fast if you do a cholesterol test, because saturated fat can stay in your bloodstream for a long time. So if you eat, if you have half and half creamer in your coffee in the morning, you go for your, your blood test for your cholesterol, it's gonna show with high cholesterol, because that fat is gonna be in your bloodstream. So fat can stay in the bloodstream for a long time, and that meat can get broken down in your gut for hours. And so the meat is getting broken down and taken to the liver, those amino acids taken to the liver and turned into glucose. And that's slow. But then you have all that fat that's just gunking up the bloodstream that's really slow. And it creates for high blood sugar for hours. And when you have high blood sugar for hours, your body has to double down and get the insulin out there. So it's just more and more and more insulin.
Okay, the other piece I wanted to ask about that, you mentioned in general, a lot of people don't think that fat can lay fat down on the body. Is the mechanism there the same, or is there a different mechanism other than the insulin blocking?
That's a good question. And I feel like Dr. Ben Bickman would be able to answer that better than I would. I can just tell you what I see in general in my, experience with working with 6,000 women now, is that it's not the same. It's not as big of an impact as eating carbs with fat, but considering that the vegans can get really skinny and people can get really skinny going vegan, I think it's a pretty good amount of fat that's getting stored as fat. Now, what goes into your bloodstream? I don't know. Some of it will stay in your gut. Some of it will get excreted out your stools. So I think it all depends on absorption. It's kind of bio-individual in that way. I think everybody is different for how much fat they eat. How much do they then convert into fat or store as fat? I think it's probably different for everybody. And then if you have the insulin factor with it, oh yeah, you're going to be doubling down on making your fat cells bigger. But this is why keto people think, well, fat can't make you fat. It's because fat doesn't make you really produce insulin by itself. Fat eaten alone. So for those people who are doing fat fasts and they're doing like just butter or just eat butter, or, back in the old keto days in the 90s or the early 2000s, when you would eat, coconut oil, and you would just do coconut oil and get your MCTs in and make all these ketones, right? The thing about that is why don't you just want to burn your own body fat? Why do you want to make ketones from medium chain triglycerides? But here's the deal is you're not going to get fat doing that really, because you're not producing enough insulin, but you're also not going to really get into fat burning either, because you're burning everybody else's fat. You're burning the coconut's fat. You're burning the cow's fat. You're not burning your own fat.
The other piece I want to highlight here that other people do talk about, but you're bringing more emphasis, is the amino acids and the gluconeogenesis. I find in the keto world, maybe 5-10 years ago, people talked about that more. and that being something to be aware of if you can't get into ketosis. But I think the number you shared was 60 or 70% of those amino acids are made into sugars. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of people in the
Yes.
ketone carnivore world often forget about that.
Yes, they do. And you know what I've noticed is it's not free. So these bodybuilders, and the way I've been able to figure this out is, again, Tom's blood sugar is a perfect example. So, meat will get broken down to glucose, even if you're not needing it to. So even if you're eating carbs, it can still get broken down to glucose. Now, I think it's probably less. I have no idea. I don't know if anyone's ever studied that. It's a question I have. I think it's probably less, but some of it is still getting broke down to glucose for glycogen, especially with these bodybuilders who are, have a lot of muscle on their body and they require a lot of glycogen. They're gonna try to make as much glucose as they can to keep that glycogen filled and to keep that muscle having its glucose needs met. But if they can switch and get fat adapted and burn ketones for fuel instead of just being sugar burners, then they do much better. They're seeing this. There was a podcast. Thomas DeLauer just did one actually with, I can't remember his name now. And they did the longest keto study. Have you seen this? The longest, it was
I know who you're talking about. Andrew Kutnick, I think.
yeah.
He's a previous
Yes.
guest of the show. I didn't watch it, but I believe I saw it in my feed.
Oh, is he? Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I just watched that. I didn't watch yours. I'll have to go back and rewatch it. I thought it was really interesting, but their performance doesn't change, being fat adapted and being into ketosis. It didn't change their performance. So I don't know why these guys just insist on being loaded with carbs. I honestly believe, and you've had Dr. Sean O'Mara, my friend, on, I know, it's their gut is making them crave the sugar and they just can't break the addiction to the sugar. And so they use excuses like, oh, I feel like shit. Well, yeah, you do for a few days when you stop eating carbs and you have to switch into fat adaptation. But, it's better than developing insulin resistance, and they're seeing all these guys develop insulin resistance and having metabolic dysfunction now because they're eating so many carbs and so much glucose. And it's because they're just loaded with insulin.
If we're talking about the same guy, same interview, he's a type 1 diabetic as well.
Yes, he is a type 1 diabetic. Correct. So he's able to track it too. And it makes it real clear. It literally dissolves the argument. There is no argument. When you look at a type 1 diabetic's lifestyle and their blood sugars and how much insulin they have to give themselves and their A1C, you can't argue it, especially when you have a whole group of them saying, yeah, it's the same. I get all kinds of type 1 diabetics in my program and they're like, you're right. And mostly they're attracted to me because they know when I say something like, yeah, ribeye spikes your blood glucose to 300 and keeps it there overnight for type 1 diabetics, they're like, it does it to me too. So when you have that many people saying, yes, that's how it works, you can't argue with it anymore. It just is the way it is.
Well, you're definitely bringing a new piece to the puzzle with this ribeye effect. Nobody else is talking about it. I'm intrigued by it. What you're saying makes sense. And I'm excited to see this go out into the world and get other people's opinions because it's a radically different paradigm than most are talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, there's always going to be the outlier that's, the type 1 diabetic says, oh, my blood sugar doesn't do that. There's always going to be someone, that doesn't happen to. But we're looking at majorities. We're looking at large groups of people. So, yeah, I hope that people can, hear what I say and just keep listening. Just keep listening to the message. There's so many people out there talking about it right now, the carnivore community. And no, I'm not the only one. Like I said, Dr. Ben Bickman, he's great. He's out there, been trying to talk about it, and it's just getting people to understand that. I guess it's more or less trying to help them to want to have a better life. Because there's a lot of people out there that don't want to have a better life. They're just stuck. And they're like, well, I just want to keep drinking my Mountain Dew and, eating my corn dog. That's what they want. That's a lot of America. And they don't want to change. And it's sad. So my whole mission is try to get women to the ones that want to change, the ones that are there that are like, I really am trying, they tried the keto, they tried the carnivore, and get them, and the guys too, to help them figure it out and to help them learn how their bodies work for the first time in their lives so they know what to do for the rest of their lives.
It sounded like other people in your program have had a similar ribeye effect, but because your husband is type 1 diabetic, anything different with his metabolism that could be a variable here too?
What do you mean?
Well, just being a type 1 diabetic, we're focusing in on this ribeye effect and this insulin response.
Mm-hmm.
Have you brainstormed any
Yeah,
other variables, given his metabolism's different, that could be part of the picture here?
He's a dude. He's got more muscle on his body than women. He's got testosterone. Testosterone makes muscle. Estrogen is fat promoting, right? Testosterone is muscle promoting. So yes, I consider all of these things, but, my biggest consideration was doing it myself. When I did exactly what he did for weeks, and it was about 6 weeks actually, and I dropped 13 pounds in 6 weeks doing exactly what he did, ate exactly what he ate. And I can out-eat Tom most times. Like, I have a really good appetite. And so I would eat the exact amount of meat he would eat, the exact amount of veggies he would eat, the exact thing, the exact plate. And I would move when he moved. I did all the things he did to keep his blood sugar in check. And I dropped 13 pounds. And I was in the best health I've ever been in my entire life. So at that point, you just kind of got to go, okay, it's probably going to work the same for everyone. And it does. It absolutely does. You have to understand how insulin works first. That's the number one thing. And if you understand how it works, then you can figure out how you need to live your life based off of that.
When it comes to classic insulin resistance that often comes up on the show, it's typically somebody consuming too many carbs, too many sugars, filling up the body with sugar, and over time, insulin, shoving that into cells, over time making more insulin in the body. And this can happen for 10, 15 years. And if you keep doing that, putting too much blood glucose in the body, too much insulin, eventually you're type 2 diabetic and everything breaks. But there is also damage happening all along that most people aren't aware of. What I'm getting at with all this, when it comes to this other piece of fat and insulin resistance that, again, I had never heard of until looking into your work, do you feel like that's just underlying classic insulin resistance and people just aren't seeing that? Or is there a bit of difference there in the physiology?
I believe 100% it is. I mean, you can develop insulin resistance and you can correct it. And I see these girls, we'll talk about, this is kind of going a little off track, but I do think it's important to bring this up now that you asked this. There's also an effect that happens where you develop insulin resistance. We call it sleepy insulin, from not eating enough glucose. So this is what will happen in the keto community too, where they will, be under eating protein, which is their glucose, source, and they'll be overeating fat, and they will be thinking that, well, I'm getting all my fuel from fat and I'm not causing an insulin spike, so it's going to make me really skinny. And they're under eating protein, overeating fat, depending on the fat for the ketones and the energy, right? And what happens is they don't get their glucose needs met. So human bodies, to hit metabolic nirvana, what I call metabolic nirvana, you should be burning glucose and ketones at the same time. Now, you'll always burn glucose. If you don't, you're dead. That's just it. You'll always burn glucose for fuel. But if you can get your insulin at that Goldilocks spot, then you get into fat burning while you're burning glucose at the same time. So inside your body, you have specific cells. And a lot of those cells can run on ketones. Some of them can't. Some of them need glucose. Your red blood cells being the biggest. You also have the retina and the inner medulla of the kidney cannot burn glucose. They need some, or they cannot burn ketones. They need some glucose. And so when you're not getting your glucose needs met because you're not eating enough meat, if meat's your only source of glucose because you're not eating carbs and you're not eating enough protein, and I see this happen in the carnivore, not just the keto community, then what happens is your body stops producing the insulin. So insulin is an expensive process for your body to make it. It's a hormone. Any hormones or enzymes, neurotransmitters, those are all, they take a lot of work for your body to make those inside. So anytime you don't use those, your body stops producing them. Okay, insulin's one. Your digestive enzymes are another one. I get a lot of girls in who are like, I can't eat a lot of meat. Well, you've been eating, 30 grams of protein your whole life for the past 20 years. You probably don't have the enzymes built up to do it yet. Just keep eating and you will get there. And that's what happens. They're like, I can out-eat my husband now, right? With meat. So it's the same with insulin. If you're not eating enough glucose to bring those glucose levels up to have your body produce that insulin, then what happens is your body gets sleepy. It doesn't produce the insulin, and you start getting the insulin resistance in reverse, where you're underproducing it instead of overproducing it. And now you're underproducing it. Anytime you underproduce, that's a sign that your metabolism's starting to slow down. And these girls will get high. They'll be, I've been carnivore for a year and I'm waking up and my blood glucose is 117 now in the mornings. And before I started carnivore, it was 80. What's going on? And I tell him, well, go eat some cheese and some yogurt, plain Greek yogurt, and do that for 3 days. And what happens? Oh, their blood glucose starts to drop again because they're producing insulin again to bring the glucose levels down. So if you undereat, you'll lower your insulin production. You'll get what we call sleepy insulin or insulin resistance in the reverse. And you won't have a strong metabolic rate because your metabolism slows down at that point because it says you're starving. Your body's starving for glucose and your red blood cells need glucose. You have to have glucose. But if you get insulin right, you can have the glucose needs met. You can have your protein needs met so you can build muscle, but you can also keep it at such a level that you're able to tap into your fat cells for fuel. And that's how our ancestors lived. Our ancestors always lived fat adapted. And that's metabolic responsibility. That's our metabolic responsibility to do that. And we really need to do it not only for ourselves, but we need to teach our kids and grandkids how to do this. Because our ancestors did it, they knew how to do it, they did it just naturally. Our bodies are meant to eat our own body fat. That's how it's designed to do. Just like bears eat their own body fat through the winter while they are hibernating, our bodies are designed to be fat adapted and to burn fat for fuel. So, so the insulin resistance, though, that's built up from carnivores. I have seen a lot of carnivores in Primal Bod that have been carnivore for several years. And they're like, I've been carnivore and I haven't been able to fix my insulin resistance yet. And it's because they're eating too much fat with their protein. It's just too much. They need to just cut back. This is the thing is you don't eat fat free. That's not appropriate either. You just stop eating such high amounts of fat. And most of them aren't even tracking it. Because in Primal Bod, we don't just eat chicken breast and tuna. Yeah, you can have those things, but that's not it. We don't even track fat grams in Primal Bod. I just tell my girls, don't be adding butter to everything. Don't be eating ribeyes every day. Avoid bacon, like the big fatty cuts of meat, brisket. If you want to do that, do it every once in a while and treat it like a treat. And don't do it all the time because you won't be able to burn fat.
I love this. More new territory here.
Yeah.
The reverse insulin resistance.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there when somebody gets in that position, having cheese, having some Greek yogurt. I assume that's because of the milk sugar and getting some carbs that way. For somebody day in, day out, there's also this fat piece you brought in at the end there. How do they go about not getting in that position Is it about having that cheese and that yogurt periodically as maintenance? Because you only brought it in as to get rectified.
Yep.
So talk about day in, day out to not get to that position.
Right. So what we do, and that's mostly I tell that to the carnivores, if there's someone out there struggling with situations like that, of course you have to talk to your doctor. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not treating anybody for insulin resistance or anything like that. But at the same time, it's a trick you can do to learn about your insulin, because a lot of people don't understand how insulin works. They don't understand that it lowers the blood sugar. Dr. Weidman, I think it's Weidman, she's the optometrist. She recently started adding carbs back in. She's carnivore, and it's been, oh my gosh, all the carnivores are freaking out about her adding carbs back in, but she's like, I got to get my blood sugar down. My fasting glucose is high, my A1C is high, and I got to get my blood glucose down. And so she added carbs back in, and what happened? Her blood glucose dropped because she's now producing more insulin. So back to your question, Jesse, which is, the insulin resistance, the carbs are just the same. Dairy's the carnivore carbohydrate. There's carbs in dairy. It'll spike your blood sugar up. It's high in fat. I'm not a dairy consumer. I don't consume large amounts of dairy. Every once in a while, I'll have a little bit of blue cheese or a little bit of aged cheddar or something, aged cheese. But dairy will screw you up too, because again, high fat, high carbs. So high fat, high carbs. And it will get your, what did I say? Makes you produce a lot of insulin. High fat, high carbs. Dairy will do that. It's high fat, high carbs, and that will make you produce a lot of insulin. So that's why I tell them, eat some dairy and it'll kick your insulin back on. Your blood glucose will start to fall back into normal range. And sure enough, but for people who haven't gotten themselves in that situation yet, you need to make sure you're eating enough meat. If you eat enough meat, you won't get into that situation. And you'll hear the carnivore doctors and the carnivore community talk about Paul Saladino and how he's went to eat carbs because he lowered his testosterone. And you will hear those experienced carnivores say it's because he wasn't eating enough meat. And that's why, because the meat is your source of glucose through gluconeogenesis when you're a carnivore. And if you don't eat enough of it, you're not going to bring your glucose levels to what they need to be. And your sex hormones are going to fail. Did you know that the ovaries have a huge amount of insulin receptors? Some of the most insulin receptors are on the ovaries. Your body doesn't want to procreate if you have chronic low blood sugar, because in the wild, chronic low blood sugar means you're starving. In today's world, chronic low blood sugar usually means you're fat. You have a lot of insulin. You ate way too many carbs. But in the wild, which is what our DNA is still running, our DNA system is still running on the same system that our ancestors ran on 30, 50,000 years ago. It's the same heart beating in our hearts, same DNA system running. That system says in the wild, if you are hypoglycemic and low blood sugar, that's a sign you're starving. You're not going to get pregnant. Your hair is going to fall out. You're going to lower your metabolic rate. Your body will lower its metabolism to self-preserve. And what I mean by that is your body's self-feeding. So it won't eat itself to nothing. Eventually it will, but the protection factor that's put in place is slow the metabolic rate down so we can maybe find food tomorrow, right? So we don't eat away at ourselves all in one day. But when you have low blood glucose, chronic low blood glucose, and you're living in the keto world, you're going to eat away at your muscle because gluconeogenesis, it will eat gluconeogenesis will break down the tenderloin you eat into sugar, and it will break down your glutes into sugar. So your body gluconeogenesis it's the same either way. The meat you eat or the meat you wear will get broken down to sugar if you don't keep your blood sugar levels stable. If you're chronically low blood sugar, it's a problem. Your body is going to eat away at its muscle.
Even if somebody's producing enough ketones?
Yes.
And I'll caveat that You mentioned specific parts of the body that do need glucose, but the little bit I assume we'd still be producing, would that be enough for those?
So what I've found, what I think, because we have all these protective mechanisms too to help from muscle wasting, eating away at the muscle, like human growth hormone that comes on after 48 hours. A woman's human growth hormone is at the peak, right? So if you're going into let's say a 48-hour fast for a woman, you're going to be going without food for a couple of days. You're going to be burning through all your glycogen, or a lot of it, right? Your body's going to be burning through that glycogen first. That's a backup sugar. That's what it's going to be feasting on. Your ketones are going to go up to compensate, to help keep your glycogen stores from being doled out all at once, right? Because it's your body's going to dole out a little bit of glycogen as you need it, as your blood glucose levels drop. But in the meantime, as your glycogen store starts to drain and insulin starts to leave the fat cell because you're fasting, your body will ramp up the ketones. So it's all a gas pedal, right? You've got glucose in the tank and you've got fat in the tank. And if you press really hard down on the glucose, your body will start to compensate with the ketones. So it will start to produce more and more ketones, and you'll go high on your ketones, but your blood sugar will stay low. And then pretty soon it starts dropping lower and lower, and your ketones start going up and up because you got to use some fuel. And if you don't have enough glucose, you'll compensate with the ketones. So people will get really high ketones, after doing 48-hour or 72-hour fasts. You're burning a lot of fat, but you're also, after about 72 hours, you're bearing the risk of starting to eat away at your muscle because you burned through all your glycogen, which is your backup sugar. So you're bearing the risk of starting to break down muscle. Now, the body has all the defense mechanisms, like I said, to prevent that, like human growth hormone spikes up, cellular autophagy starts to happen, all of these amazing things. Your gut starts to, get better, your microbiome starts to get better, happen to help you preserve the muscle. But it eventually it will start breaking down the muscle. So I like to keep my women that go through my group with that in mind, of long-term fasting can be good for health challenges. People that are facing deep health issues, long-term fasting can really be good. But if you're working on body recomposition and you're wanting to build muscle, long-term fasting can be something that it's not helpful.
Given what you just said there, how long can somebody push it? Because people do talk about doing 5-day, 7-day, up to 40-day water fasts. Again, caveating the fact that some people need to do that for other reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But how far can somebody push it in a general sense before they tap out of glucose and they start eating up muscle?
Great question. Well, it depends on how much they're moving. If they're moving a lot, then pretty quickly, because your body's like a car. The more you drive it, the more fuel you need. So the more they move, the more fuel they need, and they're going to get that fuel from their glycogen stores if they're fasting. And then their body starts ramping up on the ketones. So, you will burn fat, and it is a great way. You've heard those stories of that guy that was, did no eating for an entire year. He fasted for a year and he was still fine. So yes, your body can. It's so easily adapted. It adapts to almost anything. So you can do long-term fasting, but I also think that it's not ideal. And specifically for women, men also, but mostly for women, because women need to have some fat on their bodies. We pass children along. We are the mothers. We pass our mitochondria along to our children. And so we are really good at keeping some fat on our bodies. And if you do too much of that fasting where you keep trying to tap into that fat over and over and over again, the metabolism starts to slow down. And this is why I did a 21-day water fast one time. This was years ago. And I only lost 5 pounds for 21 days of no eating. And what happened was my body just started slowing its metabolic rate down. So I didn't need to burn through the fat any faster. And I was working out like a crazy person, but I was exhausted. exhausted. And I just ran myself ragged, slowed my metabolic rate down, and my body didn't need to burn into the fat. It said, no, we're not going to. So your subconscious or your innate intelligence is actually really smart. And it will do whatever it thinks you need to survive. So if you're under a lot of stress, it'll store a lot of fat. Not only visceral fat, and there's a whole cortisol thing around that too, but your body senses that you are under a lot of stress and you produce a lot of cortisol. It doesn't know the difference between stress from a famine or war or stress because you hate your job, right? It doesn't know that you're in a deep threat. It just knows cortisol, and cortisol is cortisol. So if you're producing a lot of cortisol, your body is going to sense that you're under some sort of threat, and it's going to want to store more fat because fat ensures your survival. If you're in a famine and you have a lot of fat on your body, you can make it. And that dude's made it a year, the guy that did a year-long fast. You can make it longer. So I think we always need to consider how our bodies were designed and follow the rules of that. Yes, fasting can be a great healing tool. I'm not opposed to it at all. And I think that, 48-hour fasts are great, 72-hour fasts are great. But as you start to get further and you do them a lot more, that can have some impacts in a negative way too. It's all about balance, Jesse, I think, right?
I agree. And coming back to what we were talking about before, that for somebody to not get in that position where they need to introduce overt carbs, it's about getting enough meat and then the body breaking that down into amino acids, gluconeogenesis, and then preventing that whole situation in the first place.
Correct.
And another layer on that I could see as being beneficial is to have that meat within a bigger bolus. And I forget the specifics, but Bart K, when he was on the show one time, talked about the fact that, I don't know if he does this daily or periodically, but has a bolus of meat within a certain period intentionally to get out of ketosis.
So he's basically using that to drop his ketones down so that his body isn't, wasting away at all of its fat. Because if you stay in that sense of like chronic fat burning, yeah, you're going to have problems. And that's what I teach my girls. You need to stay in a certain range of ketones until you've burned all the fat off your body. And then once you're down to your perfect weight, and not all the fat, you want to have fat on your body. But you're attractive. When you're attractive in the mirror and you're attracted to yourself and you like how you look, that's when you bring the ketone levels down. And so you can, in my program, what we do instead of doing what Bart K does is we just keep our ketones, nice and in this moderate rate below 0.8 after we've reached our goal. And so we're still burning fat, but we're also burning glucose. We're just not burning as much fat as we were. And again, we'll still have our glucose needs met because we're eating all the protein. But I think, Dr. Sean does that quite a bit too when he's fasting. He does 72-hour fasts every week. And he's kind of bolusing in his 4-day eating window or whatever, he's eating a whole bunch of meat, dropping himself way down on his ketones, but then he's doing that 72-hour a week and getting his ketones really, really high. So you can do it both ways. I think both ways are good.
Okay, so ketones are good in moderation, dietary fat good in moderation, even saturated fat. Let's get into the diet specifics at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You have your girls, you have your experience with a lot of different diets over the years. Let's start with you and what a typical day looks like.
Typically, I eat twice a day. So I would start out with some sort of breakfast around usually 8 o'clock with eggs, can of sardines maybe. Sometimes I'll have a couple ground beef patties with fried eggs on top. It all depends. I try to get, around 200 grams of protein a day. So I try to have 100 grams at each meal. Sometimes I'm a little less. Sometimes I'm a little more. It just kind of depends on what's going on. And then I'll have ferments with my meal too, some ferments. Sometimes I have avocado, every once in a while have a little tomato, but not very often. And then it really, vegetables, I do eat them on occasion, maybe like 2 or 3 times a month, but they don't do well. My gut does not like them. So like, for example, last night we had a green salad with our Thanksgiving dinner and some green beans, and I ate some of that. And, it's okay a little bit every once in a while, but I mostly just eat meat. And then dinner will be, or dinner we call it. It's not lunch and it's not dinner. It's usually around 2:00. And I'll have either bison, usually. I'll have ground bison steaks. I'll have regular steaks. I'll have chicken sometimes on occasion. And I'm mixing up thighs and breasts and drumsticks. I'm not eating just breasts. And I do eat a lot of fish. So I'll have cod, I'll have salmon, whatever fish, scallops, shrimp, I'll have seafood, just whatever I have in my freezer. I like to keep a variety of meats. I do not eat a lot of pork. I rarely eat pork. I love bacon, but I rarely eat it. I'll eat it when we're out to breakfast sometimes. Let's see, what else don't I eat that's in the animal kingdom? Really nothing else. I eat, elk, deer meat if I can get my hands on it. I haven't had a deer in a while. I'll eat turkey if I know it comes from a good source. And, we go out to restaurants and I eat commercially fed animals. Like, you got to live life. You don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. Just be as good as you can, right? We go out to dinner. I'm not eating the mashed potatoes. I'm not eating the rolls. I'm eating the meat and maybe a couple bites of whatever vegetable they throw on the side with it. But mostly it's the meat. When I'm ordering an appetizer, it's always the scallops or the, prawns or whatever. Like, I never feel like I'm missing out on anything, ever. I always feel happy about my position with what I'm eating in my day. I never feel like, oh, I wish I could have the cheesecake. I did all that shit for too many years. A cheesecake still tastes the same as it did last time I tasted it. I don't need to taste it again. I know what it does to my body and it makes me feel terrible. So, and I don't want visceral fat. I don't want fat on my body. I don't want unhealthiness in my mouth. So I just choose not to do it.
Okay, so mostly meat, whether you're at home or eating out.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned tomatoes, avocado,
Mm-hmm.
periodic vegetables, including Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to fruits and vegetables, and we're going to put ferments aside because I want to go into that specifically.
Yeah.
Any benefits you're looking to get from those, or is it just for diversity and flavor?
No benefits from them whatsoever. I mean, maybe a little hydration, but not even really. Like, if someone had to say something about vegetables giving them some nutrients, it would be water. But I'm not dehydrated. I drink plenty of spring water, so I don't do it. I just do it, just every once in a while. If it's there, I'll take a little bite of it, and I don't really think much of it. I don't even know why I really do it. I just, every once in a while, I'll take a little bite.
I think it's important we be clear, though. Somebody might be doing that to get a little bit of fiber or certain phytochemicals or nutrients.
Nope, nothing like that. It does the opposite for me. It makes my gut feel not good.
You mentioned that, yeah.
So, if they're really well cooked, I can eat a little bit of vegetables, a little more like green beans. I made my grandma's Tar Heel bean recipe. They were in the Instapot all day and cooked them down. They were really cooked down. And I had a couple spoonfuls of those. It was just tradition, really. It was the only reason I did it because I love my grandma and it's her recipe. But other than that, no, I don't really eat them for any reason.
All right. Well, you've mentioned Dr. Sean. You mentioned fermented foods.
Yeah.
He's big on a lot of meat, combining that with fermented foods.
Mm-hmm.
He's as specific as to say, include it in the same bite and chew them together to get those microbes.
Oh, I know.
Are you attacking
crazy
it from
about
that
it.
same angle?
Yes, we do. We do exactly what Dr. Sean says. I mean, he's the expert in visceral fat. So what he says, I do. But yes, we do a variety of ferments. we bought these little tongs. So we have these little tongs. So we just pull out little sprigs of ferments, and we put a little, like, couple tablespoons of different types. So in total, there's only like 2 tablespoons of ferments on my plate, 2 to 3. But I have little sprigs of like 8 or 9 different kinds. And then you eat a little bite of the ferment, like a little string of it with the bite of the meat, chew it up, swallow it down. I'm not as good as Dr. Sean, but I try to be as good as him. He's really good. I've eaten with him numerous times. And he's really got it down. I mean, he's got it down to a science. He's really good at eating.
It sounds like when it comes to ferments, diversity is important. Is that to get different microbes?
Yes, that's what he says. I don't know if he shared his story. Did he share his story about his stool testing from when he got his stool tested to see his microbiome?
Not that I can remember, no. Let's talk about his poop.
This is pretty funny. I know. He won't mind. I'll text him after and tell him I talked about his poop on Jesse's show. He went and had a stool testing done to see his, what kind of microbes he had in his gut. And the facility called him. They didn't know who he was. And they were like, we need to know who you are because you have the most diverse microbiome of anyone we've ever seen. Like, this is the healthiest gut we've ever seen on anyone. So, and he doesn't take probiotics, he's totally against doing stuff like that. He just gets it with the ferments. And he says the ferments, multiple types, and he does blue cheese and he does some aged cheese. I try to stay away from the cheeses as much as I can because I don't do well with them. I don't do well with dairy just for my digestion, but also they make me store fat almost instantly, and they're highly addictive. Dairy's so addictive. It's got all that human growth hormone. It's got everything to make you come back and want more, and it tastes delicious. So I try not to eat too much of that, but he does. He has like 20 different blue cheeses in his fridge and like 70 different ferments. I'm exaggerating, but he does have a lot. And he's really good at finding them and scoping them out. And he makes his own, and they're really good at it. I'm not as good as him, but I want to be.
And what do you see as being a healthy microbiome? Classically, a lot of people say diversity. Is that what you're looking for? And then what are other things
I'm
you're
looking
doing
for schools
to add to it and then protect against the modern world?
Yes, that's a good question. I'm looking at my stool constantly. Is it a number 4 Bristol, pinched off at both ends, like perfect bowel movement? When it's like that, I'm like, yes, I'm game on. I've been doing everything the right way. When it's not, it's usually because I've eaten something that doesn't agree with me, like too much dairy, or too many vegetables or something like that. So, so Dr. Sean is real big on passing microbes, and he likes to pass good microbes, not bad ones. And so he has this big thing where you're getting exposed to microbes all over, everywhere. You're getting exposed to microbes. You go to Target, you're getting exposed to microbes. And so I tell my girls, whenever they're out in public and they get exposed to microbes, just come in and drink a little drink of that fermented pickle brine or fermented sauerkraut brine. And that should take care of any bad microbes that you've been exposed to out in the world. I try to not think too hard about it because it really is kind of terrifying to think about all the obesogenic microbes out there living in people's guts. And you see people and they're just so diseased, and it's sad, but you don't want to be around them, so you don't go to the gym where they're all working out. You don't go to you find places where other healthy people are and you get with them. People that look healthy and feel good and have a good lifestyle, you hang out with them. So like the gym, for example, if you're going to the gym where it's just a bunch of, overweight people trying to get into shape, that's the wrong gym. Go find a gym where they are in shape and they're doing the right thing because they're going to have better microbes. But, a lot of those bodybuilders too, they're eating a lot of carbs. They're addicted to sugar. So, it's kind of like you got to sense it. It's almost like a deep sense. You have to sense when someone doesn't have good microbes, and you can see them. You can see people with bad microbes. Just go to Disney World. They're walking all over Disney World. Terrible microbes.
You mentioned Dr. Sean not being a fan of probiotics. I assume the same goes for you.
Correct. So we don't really do any supplements over here. The only supplements I do are I take some iodine and I take some vitamin D in the winter. I live in Wisconsin, so I take vitamin D to substitute because we don't have sun here. And I just recently started taking vitamin C and magnesium after watching Thomas Levy, an interview he did that completely rocked my world, which you should have him on your show, by the way. I'm trying to get it. I emailed him. I want him to talk to me. Dr. Thomas Levy, fascinating. He basically says we're facing this epidemic of a vitamin C deficiency and a magnesium deficiency as well. Most people know that, but we're supposed to make our own vitamin C and we don't. And why don't we? Because we're supposed to. We do it as babies and then we lose the ability to not make vitamin C anymore. And vitamin C is a major antioxidant. Our body should be making it. All other carnivores make vitamin C. Why don't we? So he has kind of opened my world up because I wasn't taking vitamin C and I was doing pretty good. I felt fine. I'd have no issues. And then I started taking it over the last month, vitamin C and magnesium. And I have noticed a huge increase in my energy and mood and a huge increase in my level of sleep. So I would have rated myself at like a level 9 for sleep prior to this. And now I'm like 12.5. I'm like above the moon. I'm like, how could I sleep any better? I sleep like a kid now. So yes, I'm kind of big on vitamin C and magnesium right now, just from watching Dr. Thomas Levy's interviews and kind of studying what he has going on over there. And I think he's right. I think we should be producing vitamin C and we're not. And so we probably need to take it. Kind of like type 1 diabetics are supposed to produce insulin and they don't. And now they have to take it.
Explain more about that, the evolution and how there's very few animals, including us, that don't produce their own.
I'm not the expert on this yet. I hope to become. But again, Dr. Thomas Levy is the one that knows all of this stuff. So I recommend anybody go watch his videos. But in short, he talks about, and he's written 13 books. His books are great, all of them. But he talks about the fact that goats, for example, so goats on a regular day will produce anywhere from 7,000 to 8,000 milligrams of vitamin C. When they're under stress, they produce 20 to 25,000 milligrams of vitamin C under stress. And it's because your body needs, basically, if you understand the Krebs cycle, you know that anytime you undergo the Krebs cycle or you have toxins in your system, your body creates oxidative stress. And when you're under cortisol and you're rapidly burning glucose, you're creating a lot of oxidative stress. And so you need vitamin C to be deposited into the cell to quench the cell so it's not rusting, because that's what oxidative stress really is. And so our bodies, our livers should be making vitamin C like they make glutathione. Glutathione is another one of our body's major antioxidants. But we should be making vitamin C and we're not. And he believes, as well as I do now, that it's an epigenetic factor. We have all of the genes to do it. We have all the whole rails are there. It's just not working. The DNA isn't the DNA isn't processing it and making it, but we have the ability to in our genes. But for some reason that gene is switched off and now we're not making the vitamin C. And people will probably say, well, it's because we're eating foods with vitamin C when we started eating, lemons and limes but you're never going to get the amount of vitamin C you need out of produce. You're just not. It's not. He claims we need around 8,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. He says a 150-pound goat produces 8,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. So there's no way we're getting enough in just produce, vitamin C. So our bodies are supposed to make it. And that's why I say, is it a lot like type 1 diabetes? These epigenetic factors, now their bodies can't produce insulin, and so they have to take it. And now our bodies don't produce vitamin C for some reason. I have a theory behind it. I think it involves gluconeogenesis. I don't know. I have lots of theories that I would like answered, but I don't know. I think that because we don't perform gluconeogenesis like we used to because of all the carbs we eat and we are dependent on glucose now, that maybe our bodies don't make it as much, It'd be interesting to know if, these are some of the questions I have for him, if if newborns make vitamin C until they're done breastfeeding and then start eating, baby food, at what point do they stop making vitamin C? Is newborns that are fed formula, do they make vitamin C? I don't know. I have all these questions for him. You should have him on your show.
I'll have to look into him.
Ask him those questions for me, Jesse.
It's not on my radar, him or any of this work, so I'm going to look into it. Thank you.
I told Rena about him. I said, you should have him on your show for sure. I emailed him just last week. I've been trying to get in contact with him. I don't know. It's Thanksgiving, so maybe he's just busy right now, but hopefully we'll get connected.
I'd like to connect.
Yep.
Okay, so when it comes to vitamin C, it sounds like newer experiment for you. How much are you doing? And then there's ascorbic acid versus whole food form.
Mm-hmm.
What form are you taking? And then are you spreading that out throughout the day?
Yes, I am. You kind of already know about this, I think, Jesse.
Well, I had somebody on the
out.
show, Morley Robbins. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. He came out last week, actually 2 weeks ago now, and he's not a fan of ascorbic acid. He explains it as the outer exterior of the car, and whole food vitamin C is the car with all the different parts. I'm paraphrasing in a big way here, but he's not a fan of ascorbic acid. So I'm curious if what you're taking is ascorbic acid.
It is, yep. And Dr. Thomas Levy is a fan of ascorbic acid. And so here's my theory on what you just said. Yes, it would be great to get it like in its natural form, but you're not going to get what you need. And this is what Dr. Thomas Levy says is, you really need to supplement with it. And I've been down these rabbit holes with vitamin D as well. Vitamin D is another big one that people want to be really purist about. But what I've seen is, and especially even in my own body, is that I do better on synthetic vitamin D. And, I have a good one. I have a great vitamin D source. But if I don't take it, and I can't be outside for 9 hours a day that I need to be to get the vitamin D. And I'm in Wisconsin, so it's just not possible. But not taking it is not an option. I do not feel good. I feel terrible. When I take it, I feel better. So with vitamin C, I've been taking it for about a month now. I feel better. I'm going to continue to take it. And if you listen to Dr. Thomas Levy, you'll hear him say that, he has seen some miraculous things happen with ascorbic acid, just plain old vitamin C. So again, don't let perfection be the enemy of good enough. Sometimes it's just better. Like my husband has to take synthetic insulin. We don't have a choice. If this is the case with us and we are that depleted in vitamin C and we have to get ahead of the curve and rehabilitate our bodies, maybe it's okay to take a little bit in a supplement. Again, I'm pretty pure. I don't those are all the things I take. That's it. I don't take anything else. So, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't take it. I know that people have their opinions on it, but for me, it's how do you feel? How do you feel? If you feel better, if you see improvements, then maybe it's something good for you. So I take about 8,000 right now milligrams a day. I'm sure I'll probably need to adjust as I go and drop it down a little bit. And I do the liposomal vitamin C. So I have, we're doing the Live On Labs has one right now that I'm doing. I also have a Des Bio one I'm doing liposomal. I have several different forms that I'm taking, just because he says it's good to get different forms in. So, I just listened to him. I listened to several of his interviews and I made up my own mind and I went, this is what we're doing. And I take magnesium with it now. And I have just, like I said, noticed so many improvements. I'm not going to stop.
I do think if you ever wanted to test, the whole food form I have, a scoop, which is pretty small, gives about 600 milligrams.
Okay.
So I could
There we go.
see realistically, if you took quite a bit of that, you could get to
You
that
would
8
get,
grams.
for sure.
But obviously, do your own research. You're feeling good, and everybody has different opinions. But I'm just
Absolutely.
curious because he is big time against ascorbic acid.
Yeah. And Dr. Levy is not. I think it would be interesting for you to have him on. So, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in the whole food forms as well. I'm not opposed to it by any means. I just think if you're trying to get it out of lemon juice, then that ain't going to work. You have to have some sort of supplement form. But if it is a supplement form of whole food, then, and it's got, the milligrams that you can read on the label and how much you're getting in, then yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
If you have a couple hours, I think you'd really like this Morley conversation.
Yeah, I'll go
Another
watch
thing
it.
he's anti, and we don't want to stick on Morley with all our time here, but we'll end on this for this part. He is anti vitamin D as well. And I know you brought that up. So just, yeah, everybody again has different opinions.
Yeah.
I'm always learning, experimenting just like you, but I like these outliers and challenging my current beliefs because it's so easy to become dogmatic and stuck in our ways. And, we're around the same age and we're going to be in this world for a long time. And I'm sure we're both going to do a lot of experimenting, and where we're at now would be foolish to assume this is the end game right here.
For sure. For sure. I mean, listen, no ego attached to anything. When I get better information, I'm the first one to admit this is better information and I'm going to try this out. And I think everyone should live their life like that. I said, I have reels. You can go back in my Instagram feed and see the reels where I'm like, you don't need supplements. You can get everything from me. I just said a year ago. And now I'm like, nope, wait, maybe we do. Maybe the carnivores need to start supplementing with vitamin C. And here's why. There's better information now. So yeah, you can't just, be so dogmatic. You're right, Jesse. That's a perfect word.
When it comes to iodine, we'll go into here and then we'll move from supplements. A controversial one that I like personally. I like Lugol's. I know in your new book you wrote about Lugol's. Talk about what you do for iodine and then any controversy, how you feel about that.
So when I first started doing iodine, it was actually a while ago, a long time ago, I started taking iodine. Then I never stuck with it. I'd take it for a while and then I'd go off. And then finally, when I created Primal Bod, I was like, we need to get back into iodine. And so, Dr. Brownstein, have you had Dr. Brownstein on your show? He's so awesome.
Yeah.
I love him.
He's amazing.
Love him. So he is really the expert on iodine, but I would recommend everybody watch your video with him. He's just so great. So I started experimenting at first. I was doing like 10 to 12 drops of Lugol's 2% a day. And I did it for a long time. I felt really good. And then I started playing around with lowering my dose a little bit, started lowering my dose. And now I'm taking about 4 to 6 drops a day of 2% Lugol's solution in my water. And I feel great. I used to have horrible breast tenderness. And it wasn't just around my period. It was all the time. And that, when I started back on iodine, but I've been consistent with it, it's gone. It is completely gone. Now, I have been on vacation and forgot to bring my iodine and been away for several days in a row, like over 10 days, and my breast tenderness will come back if I'm not on my iodine. So I know that's how bad my body needs it. So the controversy around it is you can cause problems doing too much, which you can. I've taken too much before. One time I had a bottle of 5% that I opened and I didn't realize it was 5%. And I took my 12 drops of it and I got a little buzzed for about 2 weeks. I was doing that. And I was like wide awake at night going, why am I wide awake? And then for some reason, the next day I just looked at my iodine bottle and it was like 5%. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was taking so much. And so it caused a little hyperness in me. But I've had girls in my program start the iodine protocol with Hashimoto's, and I tell them, like, you have to talk to your doctor, and they do whatever. I can't, I'm not a doctor. They have to work with their doctor, but they start on iodine, and their Hashimoto's goes away. And I know there's a lot of functional medicine doctors out there that are like, oh, why are you saying this? Oh my gosh, this is impossible. It gets so much worse. It can at first, and then all of a sudden it gets better so deeply that they no longer have Hashimoto's. So I tell my girls when they're like, my doctor this, and they put me on thyroids, and I said, pass your doctor, the Dr. David Brownstein interview, and let your doctors watch it, because he's a doctor too. And they need to learn, because all they're taught is whatever big pharma wants them to know. Whatever drug they need to sell, they're taught all the side effects on that drug, and, how to use the drug and symptoms. And that's all they're taught, is how to prescribe drugs. So they don't know any of this fundamental nutrition stuff like they should. So Brownstein figured it out. And I just think that, the other Lynn Farrow book, The Iodine Crisis, that's one of my favorite books. That's an amazing book. He did the foreword in that book. Brownstein did, but that's an amazing book. Everyone should read that book.
I haven't read it. I saw it was in your book. You mentioned it, so I will.
So good. Yep. Lynn Farrow, The Iodine Crisis. Really good.
All right, well, let's come back to your diet. We'll leave supplements, at least for now.
Okay.
You're having 2 meals. You gave me an idea what those could look like. You're doing your breakfast first thing in the morning and then your dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about why you're eating those meals in the first half of the day.
Yeah, insulin. So insulin is most sensitive when the light is out, when, your cortisol's on, you're active during the day. That's when you're most sensitive to insulin. Plus you're moving. So you're activating your insulin. Anytime you move, you create blood flow. Blood flow creates distribution of insulins, and it creates oxygen to the cell, and you're able to process things like insulin and glucose. So you're moving around. When you're eating dinner, you're storing a lot of glucose in your body and making a lot of glucose. When insulin is becoming less sensitive, your cells are not receptive to insulin late at night. They're receptive early in the day and around noon. And then as the day goes, they become less receptive. So just like when your cortisol starts rising through the night, your body's asleep. And then as it starts to rise at about 2 a.m., really midnight, and then it starts to go up 2 a.m., starts to go higher, higher, higher. And then by the time it gets peaking up, you're awake, you're alert. So insulin does the same thing. It's higher in the morning, and then it peters down as the night comes. And it's because insulin and melatonin they don't work together. So if insulin's out, you won't produce the melatonin that you need to produce. So I eat earlier because I want my insulin to be nice and low. My body doesn't need to be processing and digesting food all night long. It needs to be cleaning house. That's really what nighttime is meant, to restore and clean up. That's what melatonin is. It's a major antioxidant. So it's made to clean up your body, restore your body. And if you're digesting food late at night, you can't do that. So plus you're not moving, so you're not activating the insulin. So you're just laying there digesting. So no, I like to eat during the day and then stop eating earlier. Plus you're able to, through the night, you use your glycogen stores and you're able to get into ketosis because you're resting and your body is not producing a bunch of insulin. So all back to insulin, Jesse, all back to insulin.
All right, so when it comes to insulin, we got to be careful with the amount of fat we're eating. You talked about timing of food just now. We know that glucose through the form of carbohydrates or sugars in the diet is going to spike insulin. What other insulin tricks should we be aware of besides what we just talked about to help keep that in a healthy range?
Oh, there's so many. Okay, what ones do I want to tell you about? Okay, so exercise, movement. Let's just talk about movement because movement is another one. Movement can trigger an insulin response because you release glycogen when you move. So if you're moving a lot and you're eating a lot of carbs, you're going to continue to be burning glucose all the time, which means you're going to continue to be doing insulin all the time. So that's kind of what we talked about in the beginning of the call here is, all these guys that are developing insulin resistance from doing all these, sugar, glucose gel packets when they're doing these long cycling events and, all this long distance endurance stuff and Ironman, and they're taking all this glucose while they're doing this and they're just staying actively sugar burning. Well, you also have your glycogen stores. So for the people that aren't doing that, but they're just eating carbs and they're trying to build muscle doing this, carb loading diet, you're eating all these carbs so your glucose stays elevated. But then when your glucose levels drop, you have your glycogen. So you have these big muscles with all this glycogen in it. So your body's just burning the glycogen. It never gets into fat burning mode because you're either burning carbs or you're burning the glycogen. Either way, it's all glucose. Carbs from rice are glucose. Glycogen is glucose. All glucose creates an insulin response. So the more you move, the more you act like a crazy person and then just go home and eat all the carbs, you're just making insulin. And yes, your muscles can grow and they can become bigger, but you can also develop visceral fat and you can develop myosteatosis, which is fat inside the muscle. So you'll see bodybuilders have that appearance to them. And Dr. Sean's really good at spotting people who are competitive bodybuilders. And he's like, they're loaded with visceral fat. They can have 6 packs and be loaded with visceral fat. And that's the cortisol connection. Because cortisol help you make visceral fat, lots of it. But they're under the stress of the hardcore working out and then the blood sugar swings and dips and ups and downs. And they just are really good at producing a lot of insulin because they're chronically burning sugar. Number 2, which everyone hates me for, is coffee. Coffee will make you dump glycogen all the time. It is a catalyst. Coffee is the catalyst for cortisol. So coffee triggers a cortisol production. Cortisol stress triggers a release of glycogen, which is your excess glucose. So you're drinking coffee all day long. You're literally just pushing glucose through your body all day long because your body's chronically hitting the glycogen release. So you never get a break from it. Like in fasting, you get a break, right? But if you're drinking coffee with your fasting, you're still triggering that glycogen to be released. Anytime the glycogen is released, then you drop yourself out of ketosis. So, Dr. Sean, this is the one thing Dr. Sean and I do not agree about is coffee because he drinks a lot of it and I don't drink any. But he uses it as a tool and it can be a tool to get you into ketosis sometimes. And I think men do better with that. But women, it doesn't work. I get all the time, the women in my program, they go off coffee and they get higher ketones. Now, why is that? Because their body isn't producing so much sugar from the coffee. Coffee causes cortisol. Cortisol is your run from the tiger hormone. If you're going to run from the tiger, you need a source of glucose in your blood. So your body will chronically dump glycogen into your bloodstream to keep you energized, to keep you running from that tiger, even though you're not running. Even if you're just sitting on your ass at your computer all day, drinking your Starbucks. You're staying a sugar burner. You're never getting those glycogen stores to calm down so that you can get into ketosis. It's pretty interesting. And you can get into ketosis drinking coffee. You can, don't get me wrong. But it is an effect. There is an effect there that some women struggle with where they can't get into ketosis unless they stop the coffee because they're just making so much sugar.
So by the sounds of it, what's happening here is that the coffee is stressing the body, releasing the sugar from the muscles, from the glycogen. Is there always some glycogen left there?
I don't know about how much the body keeps in its reserves. I suspect there's always a little bit kept in reserves for moments of running from a tiger. but I do know it drains down pretty quickly, but it'll break down your muscle and store glycogen too, out of the muscle that you have on your body to keep your glycogen needs met, because glycogen is such a quick acting source of sugar. That's what you give type 1 diabetics. So I think, I don't know, it's hard to say how much is left there, but they produce a lot of sugar. The girls drinking coffee, their bodies make a lot of sugar. And anytime you have a lot of sugar, you have a lot of insulin. And insulin sits on the fat cells and gatekeeps. So you produce a lot of insulin to take care of that blood sugar. And that blood sugar, that insulin is going to get on the fat cells, and it'll keep you from getting into ketosis. All the insulin from all the glucose you produce from the coffee.
So you personally, you're not having a lot of fruit. But for somebody pushing back there saying, okay, fruit's natural. I agree with eating healthy, but I want to include fruit and vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about the aspect of how our fruit has actually changed over the years. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about modern fruit that is accepted conventionally as being healthy versus fruit of our history.
Yes. So modern fruit, I call it clown food because it looks silly. If you were to put that fruit on trees in the environment, it would look really weird. It would not look like the environment. It's there. I mean, those apples that are this big, Honeycrisp apples now like this big, and they're the size of grapefruits, and they're bright pink and bright colors, and they're just not real. And they're not real because humans have selectively bred them to look like that. So people want to eat fruit. Is it a better choice than, highly processed, toxic, chemical-laden stuff? A little bit better, not much, because those foods are still processed. They're still highly processed through selective breeding. That's the difference. But when you take a selectively bred plant and then you process it even further, then that's where it's really bad, right? So yes, the fruit in its whole form is better than the version of it that you further processed, but it's not really that much better on your blood sugar. So Tom uses fruit to get his blood sugar up. Okay, so eating a banana will have the same effect as eating a cookie on Tom's blood sugar. It's all glucose. It's all getting broken down to the same thing. That's why I say it's not the healthier option. And you're really not absorbing much nutrients, maybe some potassium, maybe some magnesium, some minerals out of the fruit, but, not enough. You can get that stuff in your spring water. Find a good source of spring water and drink a gallon of that every day, and you'll be feeling pretty good.
The hydration piece, that is something you emphasize that not a lot of other people in the carnivore keto space are. Obviously, that could be the fact you're not drinking coffee, but talk about how much water you're drinking and the importance there.
Well, I try to drink a gallon a day. When I'm in my sauna, I definitely do that, if not a little more sometimes. But I usually get between 90 and 120 ounces a day, and I drink spring water. If you have a local spring, they have findyourspring.org. If you have a local spring, go to your local spring and get it. If it's a good spring, you got to do the research and figure it out. But hydration is really important. We need to be properly hydrated, especially when you're eating a lot of meat. So meat can be very drying. It's got its own metabolic effect, digesting meat, and it creates a lot of internal heat, and it can really dehydrate you if you don't know what you're doing. So I think, drinking coffee, super dehydrating. Your body sees it as a toxin. That's why you lose all your water. You have to pee so much when you drink coffee because you're losing all your water because your body's trying to get it out of your system because it's so toxic. So coffee, super dehydrating. Eating protein, where you're creating all this internal metabolic heat by processing the protein, is dehydrating you. So you got all these other factors. So yeah, when you're full on carnivore, you should be drinking about a gallon a day, in my opinion, to stay properly hydrated. And that's without coffee. If you're doing coffee, you need even more.
Okay, coffee's out. We're clear on that. You're not drinking dairy. You're drinking quite a bit of water, quality water.
Mm-hmm.
Any other beverages that you're consuming?
Every once in a while, like last night, I had a sparkling water and I put a little splash of kombucha in it. You could do apple cider vinegar too. I don't drink like a whole can of kombucha because it's super high in sugar. And the only one I really like is is it Hum? I think it's Hum kombucha. It's pretty low in sugar. So I just do a little splash of that for the microbes in my sparkling water. But yeah, I'll drink sparkling water probably 3 or 4 times a week. If we're going out, I usually have sparkling water, put a little lemon in it or a little kombucha. That's all you really need.
Okay, earlier we talked about your eating window. You narrow that. It's the first half of the day. Early in the conversation, we talked about longer fasts. And I know part of your weekly protocol is a 48-hour water fast.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about when you're doing that and then the specific benefits you're trying to get.
Yes. So that's the longer fasting is a Dr. Sean thing. That's where I try to be like him. He does 72s. I do 48s. But actually right now, Jesse, you'll be surprised to know that I'm doing a challenge with my members that have been through the program. These aren't the ones that are going through the program. They're too new to this yet. They do 24-hour fasts every week. But the ones who have been through the program and they're metabolically fat adapted, right now, our challenge for the next 2 months is OMADs, eating between 11 and 1. And what we do this because we're trying to learn more. I'm always about learning, and we're trying to learn and understand how our bodies react to this style of eating. So we were doing 48-hour fasts every week in that group. And we've done that for about 6 months now. And the transformations with these girls' bodies are freaking incredible. Incredible. So we're doing these 48-hour fasts for about 6 months to 8 months, something like that. And then now we started our new challenge where we're doing OMADs for the next until January 1. And we're seeing how we feel doing that. And I'm making sure they know how much protein they need to eat between that 11 and 1 eating window. It's basically like the 48-hour fast thing, except we're spreading it out through the week. Right? Because if you're doing 48-hour fasts every week, you're not eating for 2 days. So your eating windows are, you're eating for the 5 days that you are eating, you're eating 2 meals a day. And so what I did was I just spread it out over OMADs for the week. So you're basically eating the same amount of food. You're just eating it in a different way. Instead of doing no eating for 2 days, we're just doing 1 meal in an 11 to 1 eating window for, the week. So that's what I'm currently doing right now. I really like that. I really like doing that. I also really like the 48-hour fast too. I like them both. But I'm learning. I'm experimenting with my body, and I'm trying to get my girls to experiment with theirs so that they learn about their body, because everybody's different. There will be some girls who don't like the OMADs, who like the 48-hour fast better. And there will be some girls who feel really good just doing OMADs. So I'm playing around with it to see. My goal is to have no visceral fat. That's what I'm working on. And it's hard. Dr. Sean will tell you, he'll be the first one. It's hard to get 0 visceral fat, but I'm trying to get as low as I possibly can. I want to be at 0. I told him I'm coming to see him in March and I want to have 0. I have very low, but I do have some. And, out of the 6,000 people he studied, there was only like 2 or 3 people that have none. So you can be very low and still live an amazing, healthy lifestyle. Listen, I know I'm good, but I want to feel what it feels like to have none, to have like almost none. I want to see Dr. Sean's face go, what did you do? I want to see that look on his face. So
We've talked about the visceral fat now a little bit. You mentioned the muscle fat. Let's talk about why this ectopic fat is so bad, how somebody assesses to see how much they have, and then is there a way to target this deadly fat specifically?
Well, the MRI doesn't lie. That's Dr. Sean's words. You have to get an MRI if you want to see your visceral fat. DEXA scans aren't they're not very accurate. So I'd say an MRI is your best bet. Of course, an appointment with him is always amazing. But, for people that can't afford to go see him, it's, there's different things that he's got biomarkers that you look at, different strategies to watch your body to see if you're having lower visceral fat. But the first thing is you got to target ketosis. You have to get your insulin in check. You have to get into ketosis so you can start burning that visceral fat. He says the heart fat goes first. The heart fat is the first fat to leave the body, which is great because all visceral fat suffocates your organs. So you don't want suffocating your heart. So he says the heart fat goes first, and then the deeper inside visceral fat will go next. But I see my girls lose it all like at once. They just shrink, they just get smaller and smaller. And as they keep going and as they stick with it, I mean, they're like totally different people. You'll see it even in their faces. Their faces will change. They will look like people don't recognize them anymore. They get these really cute little pixie faces. Their nose gets smaller. Dr. Sean says your nose doesn't grow, it just gets diseased. So their noses get smaller, all the inflammation goes away, my face has completely changed since I started doing Primal Bod. So, you just watch for these indications. If you can't get an MRI, you just try to get the excess fat that you can see. Try to get as much of that off as you possibly can. And then, maybe then go in for an MRI and see how much more do I have. That's really the optimal thing to do. But if you have a lot of fat on your body, you most definitely have a lot of visceral fat. So first thing you got to do is just shrink yourself, and do that by watching your ketones. Get into ketosis, learn about insulin and get into ketosis, and it will melt off.
Okay, so far we focus primarily on nutrition. Somebody that wants to get a Primal Bod, let's talk about the movement piece, what you're doing for yourself and with your girls.
Yes, the movement. So I am really lazy. That is my one downside with movement anyways. I would rather just sit and study. I'm kind of a nerd. But I have been walking with a weighted vest for the last year and a half, and that has done wonders for my body. Just walking with a weighted vest. I'll do some lunges, I'll do some squats with it on, but really nothing super formal. And I have been trying to do sprints. I'm not very good at them, but I've been doing some sprints here and there. I try to do it a couple times a week, but there's some weeks where I don't sprint. So, I really don't do much. I'm so freaking lazy. I pretty much just walk. And sometimes I'll throw in some squats with my weighted vest on, and sometimes I'll do a few sprints. But Tom and I just had a gym built in our basement because I told him it's time for me to start lifting weights. I need to get more of that fast twitch muscle built, and I got to do something now. I need to start lifting weights. I know that. So we just got a gym built. So stay tuned for some amazing transformation videos we're going to be doing with our members, and also me transforming my body. I'm excited to see what happens in my body when I start lifting weights, because I haven't really done it. If you see my Instagram pictures, me in a bikini, that's all with walking with a weighted vest. I haven't done anything. So it's pretty awesome. When you get your insulin balanced, you don't have to do a lot. It's pretty crazy. Now I'm excited to see what doing more does. Don't get me wrong. I'm excited to see how good I can get with doing more. And mostly for me now, because I really love how I look, most of it is performance. I want to be able to do a cartwheel. I can't do a cartwheel right now. I can do one, but it's not a gymnast quality cartwheel. I want to do a gymnast quality cartwheel. I want to sprint like a sprinter. I want to perform like an athlete, and I don't. I don't, because I'm not practicing at it. So I'm excited to start practicing and lifting some weights and getting in shape. We built a dance studio, so that'll be fun. I really think it's important to have fun when you're moving. That is a big deal with me. Have fun when you're moving. Don't do things that are super stressful. I did a lot of HIIT classes. I mean, I did the insanity class. They even call it insanity. And I hated it, but I would do it. I would go down 3 times a week in my little group and we'd do the insanity class, and I hated it, but I did it. And it didn't ever change my body. I think that you should move in a way that you feel happy when you're moving. Like when you're a kid, play. You should have some form of play in your movement.
So we went deep on nutrition. We talked about movement. You mentioned using a sauna. I know you're a fan of getting a healthy dose of sunlight when you can. You're up north. What other big pieces are we missing at this point as we come to a close to obtain that primal bod?
Cold plunging. Getting cold. Cold is definitely a great tool to get into ketosis. Absolutely, like one of the top, besides cutting out all the carbs and eating the right amount of protein and fat. Cold therapy is a big thing. We have a cold plunge. And it works. So here's a little story. So I did a Primal Bod retreat the past 2 years, and we had 90 women over the last 2 years come to this retreat. The retreat is held at my dad's river property in Forks, Washington, where I grew up. And it's on this it's like 30 acres on this beautiful riverfront property in Forks, Washington. The most pristine waters you'll ever see. And the river, it's epically beautiful. Eagles flying down out of the sky, it's just incredible. And I take all these women, these Primal Bod members who have been through the program. They're now babes. That's what we call them after they've been through the program. We call them Primal Babes. And they come to the retreat and they're camping. They're sleeping. It's glamping. They're sleeping in tents on cots and on pads, and it's glamping, but they're sleeping outside. And we're walking, we're going on hikes, we're doing challenges. So they're averaging about 25,000 steps a day, these girls, when they're at camp. And they don't even realize they're averaging that much because they're having so much fun. But the other thing they're doing is they're very cold. So we do cold plunging every morning in the river. And a lot of them go out and cold plunge later in the day too. They just go swim in the river. But they get up every morning and they cold plunge. And those girls got their ketones higher than they could ever get them. And the only difference was the cold plunging. They're like, I walk this much at home. And we were feeding them so much good food. Salmon, elk, and venison, summer sausage. They were eating brisket we had for them. I mean, they were eating like queens. They ate so much food, so much meat. They were hungry like they were kids again, right? And the only thing that changed was the cold plunging they were doing. They said, I don't cold plunge because I don't like it. But their ketones were so high. They were like, my ketones they've never been this high. And I said, well, what are you doing differently? They're like, well, I'm sleeping outside and I'm cold. I'm doing the cold plunge. So we learned after the first year that cold plunging was absolutely necessary to help women who are stuck with their metabolisms to get those ketones up. It is so great for your metabolism, getting in a cold plunge. It's also really good for your sex hormones and all other types of things. There's so many benefits, dopamine and all the other stuff, but the cold plunging, really, really critical part. And we do... you can do it 2 ways. You can do warmer temp, where you're looking at you can get cold in the ocean at 72 degrees. You don't need to go 50 degrees for your cold plunge. You can be in colder than your body temp and get chilled, work up a shiver. So it just takes longer. So you can do warmer temp. Like if all you have is your bathtub and the water doesn't get very cold, you just sit in it and sit in it for longer until you get shivered, like a little like remember when you were a kid and you'd go swim and you'd just get that little shiver. And then all of a sudden you got this ravenous hunger behind it. That is the sign that your metabolism is super high right now. So it's time to get out, time to eat, time to nourish yourself. But you want to get that little shiver in. When you get that little shiver and you get a little goosebumpy, that's the time to get out. You can do very cold and not sit as long. So either one works fine. It doesn't matter which way. I like to mix it up and do both.
All right. Any other things before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think we talked about everything we could ever want to talk about.
Well, I really enjoyed the conversation, Candi. Thank you.
Yes,
You have a new book
thank you,
coming
Jesse.
out. We're going to link that up. Your social
Yep.
media, your YouTube channel. Really enjoyed this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jesse. Me too. It was an honor to be here, and I super appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
I'm talking to you right now. If you got a chronic disease and you're not getting rid of your visceral fat, stop complaining. Don't wait for your doctor to tell you to do this, because it's literally kept out of medical school. Just get